So I'm going to go through and introduce everyone. We have Fiona, who is the inter-varsity Christian Fellowship here on campus. Sorry. Then we have Mr. Frank Teston, who is the president of Dignity Canada, and he comes to us today from Toronto. Then we have Rabbi Clark, who is the rabbi for Or Shalom, which is right behind King's, I think, that general area. Then we have Reverend Ken Greg Smith. I believe he goes by Greg, yes? Okay. Reverend Ken Greg Smith. He works at Huron in the Department of Theology. Then we have Reverend Karen Lowe. She's the Western chaplain for the United Church. And then we have Reverend Paul Whiting of the Metropolitan Community Church of London. And then we have Myuri, who just walked in. Hi. And Seth Armstrong is our coordinator.
Okay, so I'm kind of like the moderator. If you guys have like questions throughout, like either like raise your hand, throw a spitwad at me, like just flag me down. Most of you have my number, you can text me or tweet me, whatever works best for you. Call me, tweet me, reach me. Yeah, someone else can make impossible reference. So I'm just gonna give a little like interlude of why we're doing this today. So it starts a little bit of a story, it's a personal story. So last year, I was hanging out with some friends, and I had a friend be like, hey, you need to come to this really cool Christian potluck I go to. And I was like, Christian, that kind of like a scary word for me. And then the same day, another individual, who's also my friend, came up to me and said, you should come to this Christian potluck we're having tomorrow night. And I was like, again, with this word Christian, I'm kind of scared by this. And then the next day, I had another individual come up to me and say, hey, I'm going to Christian potluck, you should come. And I was like, damn, like, what is happening in this world right now? And then I had a fourth individual in 24 hours come up to me and say, you should come to this Christian potluck. And I was like, they're trying to convert me. That was my immediate reaction. I was like, Mom, like, they just keep asking me, and like, they seem to, like, they're on my radar, I just don't know what this is. They want me to come and like, convert, I don't know what they want, like, and my immediate reactions were negative because as a queer individual, through the media and just through interactions with other people, I've learned that the word queer and religion don't mix. That they shouldn't mix, that they're not allowed to mix, that there's all these rules that say, no, if you're queer, you can't be religious too. And I'm a women's studies major, so that's kind of awkward for me because I believe in intersectionality, where you can be like, queer and religious, and you can be black, and you can be all these other things, and you can be such a mixture of things. So eventually I decided I'm going to try this potluck because I'm hungry, I don't have groceries, and who doesn't like free food? And I ended up knowing the majority of the people there, which was really awesome. And I had some lovely conversations with some people who are actually in this room right now, and I was like, oh, so you don't hate me because I'm queer. This is amazing. What is this? And so over the year, I started slowly hanging out with them more and more and more and more. And now I go to church. The other thing was, though, is I started talking to my queer friends and saying, hey, I'm going to this like Christian potluck, or I'm going to church. And the weird looks I got were, Steph, the church hasn't burned down when you walked in it? Say what? And that was I went to church the first time with them. I was like, guys, it didn't burn down. Holy crap. Sorry for my offensive language. And I was just like shocked. I was like, it didn't burn down. Like, what is this? Come on in, come on in. I just see people waiting out there. So it was kind of like this really cool interaction. And I've slowly started hanging out with these people more and kind of finding out where the border lines are and where you can and cannot, where religion mixes with queer issues and where it doesn't. But I still have my questions. And I'm a pretty outgoing person, so most of the time I'd be like, hey Fiona, can we have a discussion about religion? I just like need to figure out what's what. But I know a lot of my friends aren't that outgoing and aren't gonna be like, so I'm gonna find like a local priest or minister or pastor or something and talk to them. They have questions that they want answered and they're not quite sure who to go to, or they don't have the courage. They think they're automatically be shunned. So I figured this would be a great forum because we brought the religious people to you. So we're going to kind of just briefly, that's kind of where we're standing. So, you know, you can get questions answered in a safe space. No one's looking to attack anyone. So don't attack any of these nice people up here. They're volunteering their time. I'm going to put that up there. They're not going to attack anyone up there, so don't attack them. So it's going to be a really awesome panel. I'm going to give them each some people want 5 minutes to say, 2 to 5 minutes to kind of just give a brief synopsis of themselves, the religion they associate with, if they can speak to any other religions. Basically, I kind of told them earlier, what makes you different than the person sitting next to you? Like, not like as a person, like, because clearly you're all different people, but more so, what makes your religion different? Like, what is its core values versus the other core values sitting at this table? Kind of just introduce themselves and their religion, or whatever denomination or whatever they are. We're going to start at the far end. She's the one who has the good potlucks, so let's save your good graces. So Paul can start down at the far end.
I was licensed as a Pentecostal minister in 1978 in England. And I was unlicensed in 1982 when I came out as a gay man. I then did an assessment to become an Anglican priest, and they said, there's just one thing wrong. You need to go back in the closet. So I sort of gave up church because I couldn't find a church that liked me. And I worked as a gay Christian activist for a number of years, until I stumbled across Metropolitan Community Church. And they loved me. And so 25 years ago, this year, I was ordained in Metropolitan Community Church. MCC was founded in 1968 as part of the civil rights movement in the USA. It's probably seen as the church within the lesbian and gay community. That's certainly how it was identified for many years. We're really a multi-denominational organization, in as much that 40% of our congregation in London are Catholic, 30% are evangelical and Pentecostal, and the other 20% just come because they like us. It was really a church that was set up for people who felt disenfranchised or actually physically rejected by their church. But over its 44 years, it sort of matured into a pretty diverse church. I would say we still tended to be something on the fundamentalist, evangelical perspective. I heard it once said that MCC was a religious right of the gay movement, which I thought was a very interesting comment. Here in London, the congregation has existed for 32 years. We currently share premises and ministry with Christ Anglican Church, which is Greg's church. We have a pretty vibrant congregation. I think one thing that is probably unusual about MCC and amongst the more progressive churches is that we're a relatively young congregation. Our primary, demographic of people in 35 to 50, and we have people who are 2 years old and people who are 93 years old. So why am I different? It's all about politics, really. I think if we could get rid of politics, we could work together really well. One more thing, I've been conducting same-gender commitment ceremonies since about 1990, and I've been doing them legally since I've been in Canada for the last 3.5 years.
I'm Karen. I'm part of the United Church of Canada. The United Church is one of the mainline Protestant denominations in Canada, and it started back in the 1920s with an amalgamation of Presbyterian, Methodist, and Congregationalists. So we took the best of those traditions and carried them forward. And the United Church has had a long history of being on the front lines of social justice issues. One of the ones that got a lot of press was back in the 1980s when there was a discussion as to whether or not homosexual individuals could be, in fact, ordained as ministers. And it was a discussion that went on for years, but the upshot of it was that, yes, we were deemed to be people and could thereby be ordained. It's been a long struggle of that particular social justice issue in the history of the United Church. We have grabbed a lot of headlines about how inclusive and welcoming we are. However, that we have a bottom-up kind of governance instead of a top-down, and so individual churches within the denomination kind of make their own way, and as a result, you can't walk into any United Church, unfortunately, much to our shame, and find exactly the same thing, the same acceptance, the same policies. The United Church of Canada stands in favor of full rights and the full inclusion of the LGBTQ community. That doesn't happen in every congregation in Canada. The United Church of Canada stands for same-gender marriage. You cannot find a minister or a congregation in every church that will perform same-gender marriages. So we have a robust social justice background. We have a less illustrious history of across the board living out of those policies that we proclaim and those headlines that we grab. I have personal experience with that in having served in a congregation up north for about 10 years and committed the cardinal sin of coming out and was bullied from my pulpit and from the community. And so we say we're warm and welcoming and inclusive, and I believe that that's our intent. If I didn't believe that, I couldn't still be a part of the United Church. But we still have a long way to go to make that a reality in every congregation in Canada.
Greg Smith. So I'm here representing my particular part of the Anglican Church. And I say that because you need to know that the Anglican Church is an international collection of national churches. So I'm part of the Anglican Church of Canada, and who are united collegially with under the auspices of the Lambeth Conference, which is overseen by the Archbishop of Canterbury. A lot of people tend to think we're run by the English Church, but we're not. We're all independent international churches, but governed collegially. Our historical roots are we are solidly within the tradition of the Christian Church, following Jesus' lead, calling us into a recreation of God's kingdom, the renewal of God's kingdom, and looking for that kingdom to come among us. But our historical, I like to describe our historical creation really relates to the Elizabethan settlement. A lot of people tend to have the misconception that it relates to Henry VIII and his need to have a divorce and get married, and that's how it's often taught. But really the nascence of Anglicanism comes out of the Elizabethan settlement, in which the historical circumstances of a country in which there were people of extreme religious beliefs on either end of the Christian spectrum and needing to govern this country said, look, we're going to find a way to bring this together. We can have extreme different beliefs and live as one people at the table of God. And so Elizabeth said, that's what we're going to do. God bless her. And gathered the bishops together and said, this is what you're going to do. And at the point of the sword, that's what they did. This is ignominious history sometimes behind us. But That is, and that quality of what she hoped would be an elasticity within the denomination has continued to follow us and be with us, struggling, and it's a struggle, it's not easy. And if you've heard any of the news around the Anglican Communion in the last 10 years, you know that this issue that we're looking at today and this reality that we're looking at today about same-sex relationships and same-sex marriages, etc., is causing quite a foment, because it's hard to find out how you live together under one roof with such varied opinions and very diverse attitudes. So we're really struggling with that. And one of the things a colleague once said to me was that one thing I admire about Anglicans is that you do it in public. We all do it behind closed doors, but you argue out in public, and it's there. And that's pretty much where we are. I myself, I am a gay man and an ordained priest in the Anglican Church. I have a parish. I have struggled through how I work in the church. I was married before I came out, and have gone through all of that painful life story within the context of the church, and I wouldn't have done it anywhere else. My community was the place where I could come to a truth about my personal integrity and find a place for healing in all of that. And that's what my faith brings to me, and what I hope will continue to bring to other people.
Arguing in public is something Jews are very good at. Depending on how you count, Judaism has been around either since Abraham or Moses at Sinai, or the development of rabbinic Judaism around the destruction of the temple. There's been divisions within Jews in all of that history. The division that's particularly relevant for me being here today is the division in the late 19th century into Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform Judaism, with the addition of Reconstructionist Judaism in the 20th century, and some other splits since then. I'm Rabbi Catherine Clark at Congregation Or Shalom, which is a conservative synagogue, so I'm a conservative Jew. Conservative Judaism, one of the things that governs or influences its outlook on the world is the idea that Jewish law, halakha, is binding, and also is a living tradition, which means that it is not frozen by how Jews in previous centuries might have interpreted it. One of the ways that this plays out is that the conservative movement has a committee on Jewish law and standards, which is the body that determines halakha. In 2006, they voted to ordain people who are gays and lesbians and ordain them as rabbis and invest them as cantors. And they also voted to allow rabbis and cantors to perform same-sex marriages. 2012, they finally came out with a ceremony for doing that. A little slow on the draw there. And another division that's relevant for me speaking here today is within conservative Judaism, which exists in North America, Israel, South America, and parts of Europe. The Canadian conservative Judaism and U.S. conservative Judaism are in somewhat different places when it comes to the ordination and investiture of gays and lesbians and on same-sex marriage.
Hi, my name is Frank Teston. I'm with a group called Dignity Canada Dignité. I'm not a church minister or rabbi or employee, so I'm a little bit different on this panel. Dignity Canada Dignité is an organization of Catholics who are concerned about the church's teachings on sexuality, and particularly on LGBT issues. We work in collaboration with other reform-minded Catholics to try to bring about changes in the church structure and teachings. We also try to provide a listening heart to Catholics and others who are struggling with LGBT issues. We have 4 active chapters in Canada, Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Toronto. Now, I've distributed 2 photocopies. I know that there weren't enough copies, so I think everything I'm going to be referring to on these 2 sheets are on our website at dignitycanada.org. The first page simply is what the official hierarchical church teaches. I would point out 2 things. There was a change in 1997 to the statement. In 1992, it read, that one sentence read differently. The other thing I'd like to mention is that the reference to homosexuality as subjectively disordered, that phrase was used for the first time in October 1986. So if anyone suggests it's been around forever, it's been around since October 1986. On the second page, it's a result of a couple of surveys conducted in the United States in late 2010. And the results were that 43% of Catholics favor allowing, I'm looking at the first two bullets, 43% of Catholics favor allowing gay and lesbian people to marry, 31% favor allowing them to form civil unions. Now, if the question in the questionnaire clearly specifies marriage as like what you get at City Hall, Catholic support for allowing gay couples to marry increases by 28 percentage points to 71%. What I'm trying to show in these two pages is kind of what the hierarchy is saying and what Catholics, the people in the pew, what they are saying and how they are acting. And on very few issues is there such a big gap between the two. Okay, in June 2011, the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops came out with this document, Pastoral Ministry to Young People with Same-Sex Attraction. Dignity Canada has difficulties with it. I'm trying to stay within my timeline. We believe that the teachings presented in this document are not properly nuanced and do not differentiate between loving relationships versus manipulative ones, between consensual versus violent acts, between emotionally enhancing versus destructive acts, etc. And in an accompanying guide to this pastoral document, and one sentence says, quote, persons who engage in homosexual activity need to feel guilty, end of quote. We find this objectionable because it does not recognize or encourage the emotional, psychological, and spiritual growth of the person that can occur in a consensual, loving sexual relationship. That is the precise situation in which we discover and know the love of God. Now, in response to the CCC document, Dignity Canada Dignité prepared and posted a document on our website entitled Pastoral Ministry to Young Persons, Two Perspectives. First, it provides a link to the CCCCB document, expresses our agreement with certain sections of the bishop's document, but also presents our reviews on what we consider to be a more appropriate pastoral guide. It relies heavily on a document on sexual ethics that was prepared in the late 1980s by our sister organization, Dignity USA, with input from the Canadian organization. It came out of a 5-year consultation and discernment process that involved 800 completed questionnaires and many in-depth interviews with members and experts. And I invite you to check out our website where you can find the document.
Cool. My name is Fiona Jack. I work with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. And the thing that makes me different is that I am not so wise in years as the people on this planet. I'm not a pastor or a minister. If I want to make my job sound cooler, by cooler I mean like more professional. I would say I'm a campus minister. I work for an organization that is a parachurch ministry, which if you are not church basically means it's an arm of, we consider ourselves to be an arm of the church, the body of Christ, people who follow Jesus. And we are on campus in over 150 different countries for the explicit purpose of helping students recognize their full potential in their lives as followers of Jesus. I came to know God, I became a Christian when I was at university, not coming from a heavily religious home, and noticed in that space that young people and the church tend to not mix because through the eyes of the young person, the church is, take a pick, judgmental, hypocritical, boring, lame, a waste of time, etc. Scary. And I think God is none of those things. I think he's active and ready to go after people's hearts and actually about transforming people into men and women who actually go after life to the full. I'm also kind of on this panel because I was talking with Steph and she was telling me this awesome thing is happening, it's a multi-faith panel, but like I've been emailing people and not a whole lot of people said yes. Like I sent tons of emails and people either said I'm too busy or I don't have time for that or just didn't reply to my email. I sometimes don't reply to email, but I think it wasn't just that they forgot to. I think that sometimes religion and sexuality don't know how to talk with each other, people who represent, which is weird because we're all spiritual people and we all are sexual beings, so you'd think we have conversation. When I talk to people about being on this panel, number one question I got was, are you nervous? Are you scared? Because somehow this dialogue is supposed to be scary. Sometimes it's supposed to be angry, somehow it's supposed to be taking each other down and clawing each other's eyes out. And I'm just glad we're not in America. So here I am excited for this conversation to be one wherein I come on this panel as a person who says, I love Jesus and I know that God is good and there's a lot I don't know. I have two gay moms. I was raised by closeted lesbians. They came out 3 years ago and got married 4 years ago. And I have gay uncles on this side and gay uncles on that side, and I'm straight, but that's my family situation, which informs questions for me about what it means to be a follower of Jesus and help people understand their relationship with God when the issue of sexuality has so often been used as a political bat instead of just a question we might have questions about. So that's what I have to say.
Well, thank you. She's just like, I don't know, she just makes me smile. Okay, so I'm going through my questions. We have 3 questions, and like half of them don't apply anymore because people are far too accepting. And I actually sent someone in this audience a text and was like, I need more questions. People are too accepting on this panel. That I didn't think that would be a problem, but apparently it is. So we're rearranging our questions right now. So actually, Karen actually sparked this question in my head. Yeah, you're welcome. Just shove it there. So you're talking about like the next steps in unifying your church overall and kind of making sure that every church is at the same spot under a certain religion. But like, what are those like next steps we can take to unify religions overall, or like churches within religions? Like, does that question make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Well, like, what are we? Oh, okay. I just thought that was like a question. I thought it was, you know, like, well, like, what are those next steps? And you guys can all answer this question, but like, you know, what is like those next steps?
I think coming from the United Church perspective, it's creating those safe spaces where we can find them, and then having those people within those safe spaces demand the same everywhere they go. I think we've been prescribed to for far too long. We have allowed the heterosexual community and the church structure to say, well, this is what we'll let you do. This is what we'll allow now. And I think it's by far time that we stood up and said, no, this is what we want now, and now is the time that we want to have it. And I think until our voices become just as loud as the more conservative voices and the ones that are stuck in very old theology, until we can make our voice voice heard and recognize that we have a right to equal access and to full equality within the church and demand that we have it. I think that that's where we've got to start, because we get too caught up in the arguments and the proof texting from Scripture, and all those arguments become so convoluted. This is a human rights issue, and within the church, those human rights above all should be highlighted, I think, and should be lived out. And we've got to stand up and demand it and recognize what century we're in and go forward on that basis.
To use a Christian metaphor, sometimes something has to die first before it can be resurrected. And I think the church, the traditional church, is in huge decline in the West. And I don't expect to be involved in the church in 30 years' time, but I'm very intrigued, what the church would look like. I mean, I guess because it's existed for centuries, it will struggle against death. But part of me feels, there is a new sense of spirituality that has emerged in the last 10, 20 years that will probably show itself as something different to traditional church.
Okay, I actually am going to ask a similar kind of question. Karen touched on it a bit, as did Paul. Why do you think overall organized religion can take so long to evolve with the rest of society? Like, we saw that, I know, it's a loaded question, I love it. But you see like the actual province passing same-sex marriages, and then the church eventually sort of kind of is like, okay, I guess we'll hop on that boat finally, now that it's halfway across the ocean.
I'll jump in on that one for a minute. I'm American. I've only been in Canada for 3 months, and in the United States.
Bless your heart, I love you.
In the United States, it's actually the reverse. The conservative movement voted on the issue of officiating at same-sex marriages 6 years ago. The reform movement was long before that, and part of that decision had to involve what do you do, how do you counsel the people for whom you'll be officiating their marriage, how do you counsel them, how do you be honest with them that this actually isn't going to change their legal status in any way, and how do you not run afoul of the law in a state where you are a rabbi. And conservative Jews in the United States have been pretty active in this push to allow civil same-sex relationships to be recognized. So we're not always an agent of, we're not always a conservative force in society. And by I don't mean conservative Judaism with a capital C, I mean conservative little c. We're not always like that, and religion can be a force for positive social change. It just depends on the context that it's in.
In particular, in the Christian tradition, it's very bizarre, actually, that we should be at such a place, because what happens is that, and it's happened really from the first centuries, is that those within the movement forget that its origins is a countercultural movement, opposed to the empire and its solutions for how human beings might live together under peace. At the same time, that becomes, I think, also an element that produces conservatism in some ways too, because I think that whole element of raising up the fact of counterculturalism, once society moves on something, a number of Christian communities say, well, that's society. Is that us? And so it raises that whole dynamic of, do we hop in bed with our culture and society, or are we mandated to be different from society and therefore we should stand for something else, and then that gets all kinds of emotive stuff. But, personally, for me, I think the listening and looking at Jesus lead is what we're about, and that's the best way forward. So.
Yeah, I would just agree with the space of, I think, throughout, first of all, 2,000 years ago, at the time of Jesus, and then also throughout history, many social movements have come out of religion. Women's rights and children's rights and workers' rights and spaces of declaring places of oppression to be bad ideas and a need for people to be their brother's keeper and to serve before they look at for their own interests and on and on. I think that it's interesting that what often happens around issues of sexuality is that we polarize as communities, and so both because the LGBT community has been so deeply oppressed, places of aggression have come out of that community that also aren't the way forward. So places that say, like, we demand these things and we're angry about them, that don't actually create on-ramps for people to try and understand the issues involved. And I think to be people of faith is again, at least in my faith, is to look at the example of Jesus and also to look at the hope of God, the idea of, there's this term called shalom, which is both Jewish and Christian people come to that. This idea of right relationship, that we would be people who care about each other first and foremost, and return to right relatedness. And when we forget about that and start going left, right, black, white, bad, it's just bad.
You can talk as much as you want.
It makes me think too, I think on issues of sexuality in particular, I just want to put in a word for faith communities, because faith communities come out of our culture. They do come out of regular human, I was going to say intercourse, but that would make the right word to say, but anyway. But what I want to say is, like, the whole issue of sexuality has not been handled well by the human race over a period of time. It is an issue that people generally struggle with in terms of talking about and how meaningful, what place our sexuality has in our role as a human being living on this planet and in our relationships with one another. We really, and so you can argue, I guess, that maybe the church is responsible for the reticence of humankind, but I think the two go together, and what we need to do is find the language. I really like what you had to say. I mean, we really need to find that language and that desire to bring sexuality itself out of the closet and into the open as a significantly rich part of the human experience to be celebrated. But because culture and Western culture, maybe particularly, I don't know, has had a hard time with that. The church does too, because we're part of that. Other faith communities too.
Okay, we have a direct question to one of you up there. So I'm going to let the audience ask that question. Neither of us want to get up.
All right. I just have a question about the article that you handed out, just about the statistics. For the most part, it seems pretty encouraging, which is great. Like, you talked about how you have the tradition and you have the reality, which for the most part seems pretty good. I just have a question about just the method of the study of the statistics, like how Catholic was defined, were the practicing Catholics, who were baptized Catholic, that kind of thing. Just if you could clarify kind of the statistics a little bit.
Probably self-identified. However the respondent kind of categorized their religious affiliation. I think the sample sizes were 1,000. So anything above 400 is a pretty good sample size.
Thanks, Haley. Haley's great. We talk a lot about like same-sex relationships and how they get along with the religion and whatever, but we're leaving out a large quantity of the queer community, and that's our trans population. And I don't know historically how church and the trans population has gotten along, but maybe you guys can speak to it a bit more. How do churches or religion view the trans population, etc.? Just speak to the topic. Go for it. You guys don't even have to raise your hand. Just like, as long as you don't interrupt each other, just be polite to each other.
We were brought up in church. MCC is an issue church. Therefore, it's always difficult to see beyond your own issue. And it was founded, out of the lane, gay lesbian movement. But, the thing that haunts me, if you look at church history, the oppressed always become the oppressors. And I recognize that MCC really has to broaden itself. And I think it's doing okay as far as embracing the trans, bi, questioning community, the straight community into the church. But I say okay because I'm not proud of it. I mean, probably 5% of our clergy worldwide identify as trans men or trans women. And certainly in our minds, we're an inclusive church and therefore we want everybody to be welcome, but to get out of our ghetto and actually be that inclusive church is the challenge. But I suspect we're probably ahead of the game compared with a lot of churches.
We have in the United Church a few...
And can we just speak into the microphones just in general a bit more? Or you can move your microphone, say like they're long necks, like...
We have a few folks in the United Church who identify as transgender, who have been ordained. And as far as I know, at this point, they're all employed. They have found congregations. They have found communities that within which they are welcome. But I don't think that that's a broad indication of broad acceptance. I think, as Paul said about MCC, we have a long way to go in the United Church. Just in living out that acceptance. But certainly the trans community would be included in our statements of inclusivity that we make.
The conservative movement started working on that issue soon after the decisions that came out in 2006. Some people read the halachic decisions, the decisions of Jewish law that were written then to already cover that situation, and some people don't. We too have a long way to go on that, and I'm not exactly sure where things stand with the latest discussions of it. I have to admit to I have not done all of my homework. I forgot to look that up.
I would say in general, it's just a comment I have, that transgendered issues are ones, speaking for the church at large, that for people who do not experience that reality for themselves personally, cause fear, which is generally the reason why we don't talk about most things. Or generally the reason why we go to polar extremes on anything, because we're afraid. And so it's something that I think the cool thing to me about what should be the basis of the church, Jesus and his ministry, is that he lived a life where he set up a table and he was like, if you come, you belong. And he wasn't like, and by that I mean jump through this hoop and then that hoop. He said, if you come, you belong. And he said, I have something new for you. And that can exist in a hell of a lot of situations whether that is I have something different than fear for you, or have something different than oppression for you, or I have something different than the authority you currently seek for you. So I think that this is an issue that the church in general sucks at understanding the philosophy of Jesus. And I'm sorry that we have done that. I'm really, really sorry.
Maybe a little subversive theological thought. Maybe Jesus was trans. Because in Matthew 19, he identifies himself as a eunuch. I don't have the answer to that, but that's an interesting thought to run.
We're all pondering. Oh, okay. Can I grab your audience question after I have like one text question from the audience? People are getting my numbers that I don't know, and they're like, "Hey, by the way," I'm like, "I don't know how you got my number, but this is cool. You're sitting by people I know, so I'm assuming." So it's actually for Rabbi Clark. At least I'm going to pose it to Rabbi Clark. I'm just wondering about the conservative Judaism, its difference from Christianity and other sects of like Orthodox versus like what, like how is it different, or why is it different, or like
on this particular issue, or
no, just like I think it's just generally.
It is general.
Yeah. Okay. I knew who it was, but like. And on this issue, you can answer both questions now and you post them.
I don't know much about Christianity, so I'm not going to talk about how it differs from Christianity. I do know more about Orthodox Judaism and Reform Judaism and Reconstructionist Judaism, but not as much as I know about conservative Judaism, so this might be an oversimplification. In fact, I'm sure it is. But Jewish law is very important to the conservative understanding of Judaism, as I believe it also is to Orthodox Judaism, but that Orthodox Judaism is more conservative in how it understands change in law. On this particular issue, that often means that that means that people who are gay or lesbian can't be ordained. It also means that women can't be ordained. For the most part, there's been some movement on that within particular types of orthodoxy. The Reform understanding of halacha is often that Jewish law has a vote, not a veto. So that's also a very different understanding of Jewish law than what conservative Judaism has. That's a huge topic, and I feel like it's one I did not do justice to at the moment, but I'd be happy to talk with you more about it later.
And at least you tried. Okay, here.
I just want to go back to the trans issue for a moment. I'm in a sort of unique position. I'm a cradle Anglican. I'm married to the lovely United Church minister. I'm a founding member of FCC London. I define myself as an SBR, and I think David was one of the coolest guys I've ever met. True. So I watch what religion is doing, and I'm watching everybody rush on the trans issue and inclusivity and how we feel about that and who we're going to ordain and who we're going to accept and how we're going to accept it. I don't even see, with the exception perhaps of MCC, that they've settled the LG issue. And one of the criticisms that I have, and this is why I'm able to be married to my lovely wife, about the United Church is that they love to say, oh yes, we're inclusive, and they slap the press over the door and they bait the LGBT community in. They say, the National Post and the Globe and Mail says you're welcome here, you can be ordained, and you can be married. They don't show you the little, this particular church's mileage or bearing. Does it feel like a rush to include the T in LGBT? Is there a danger to I'm not trans identified as gay, but my community, the LGBT community?
One of the things that Judaism struggles with in general, and a lot of congregations struggle with, is being welcoming. People say we're not friendly. After services, we have something called Kiddush, which basically just means snack, but it's a holy snack. And nobody talks to me at Kiddush, or no one invites me to sit with them at Kiddush. We're not a friendly congregation. And one of the things that I've been trying to communicate is that if we're not welcoming to everybody, we're not welcoming. And that's a hard message to hear, because there are some boundaries that are meaningful to us. One is Judaism, as opposed to other religions, is a boundary that is meaningful to us. But if we're not welcoming to people who are trans, we are probably also not as welcoming as we think to people who are lesbian or gay or single or widowed or what have you. We're not as welcoming as we think, and we need to be.
And I think in the Christian tradition, if we think about the way Jesus chose to teach was often through hyperbole. That what about in this situation? The Samaritan's going down the road, or the Samaritan stumbles upon this person, and it's the Samaritan that turns around to be the person who acts most faithfully in the situation. What does that tell you? So I know what you're saying, because this tendency to jump on issues and feel righteous is quite a habit of some more liberal churches, and whether they ever get to the meat of that is a big problem. But not looking at the whole everything also made a way really challenging where we're at in the moment, which is.
And I think to a large extent, we don't understand welcome. So how can we, well, I don't think we can divide up the alphabet and say we haven't yet dealt fully with the LG community, so now we can open it up to the B and then the T. I don't think we can divide up the alphabet. I think that we don't understand what welcome is. Either we welcome everyone or we welcome no one. That I am just a real fan of the South African philosophy of Ubuntu, community. How can I be happy until we are all happy? And I think that we have to recognize that we don't do a good job in the church of welcoming people. We do a great job of taking care of each other, and we do a great job of writing checks and patting ourselves on the back and thinking that we have done a great thing for some little child in a foreign land. But were that little child in a foreign land to show up on our doorstep, how would our welcome be lived out then? I don't think we understand fully what that means, that we all belong at the table, we all belong within the confines of the church, and the church belongs out in the world, embracing everyone. And until we understand that, I don't think we can deal with any issues. I think there's still pockets of racism, and there's still pockets of sexism. All of those social issues that we think that we have addressed are still just pockets lying in wait until an issue comes up to bring them to the forefront again. So we have to understand what it means to welcome and include.
Just a point to make, it's really a pleasure to be here. I sense a humbleness on the part of the Multifaith panel, because during the Occupy movement, I was not a part of it very much, but just as a layperson on the outside, a member of the community looking in, when Multifaith stood up and took on the follow-up, it was a very powerful and beautiful thing, because we tend to blame multinationals. We have a general sort of idea that people are failed, you know, and that's one thing, but the faiths can kind of provide a check, and it was a great relief to see the involvement, because with most faiths there is a very strong underpinning of community and of love and an effort. It's just our human construct plus the dogma that is centuries and sometimes thousands of years old that is always a difficult theological issue to bridge. So, the faith offers so much.
I technically have two questions, but I'll do them in parts. So
we have questions in the back.
I don't mean to monopolize on the mic, I'm sorry. So it sounds like most of you are, I guess, a personal belief that causes you to be open-minded to the LGBT community, but what is it about your religion or faith that influences that thought? So what is it that you perceive and, I guess you could say, analyzing your own religion that causes you to have that belief, and whether or not you're open-minded to the LGBT community? That question makes sense.
Judaism includes the idea that we're all created b'tselem Elohim, which means in the image of God, if that's the case. And it also has the idea that kavod habriot, which is respect for all God's creatures. And if that is how I'm going to view the world, that compels me to be sensitive to the needs of everyone in my community and people who aren't part of my community.
Ditto.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. It starts from the basis of creation, who we are, whose we are, and in Christian tradition, I like what Fiona had to say earlier. I like
It's a cool church. Yeah, my pastor's got that.
It's really
cool. But being shown the embodiment of this sacredness of the whole creation through the model of Jesus who opened the table and said, "Come." And the words he said, "If you come, you're in." Is that what
if you come, you belong.
If you come, you belong. Yeah. And we journey together. We journey together and we discover life together. And so yeah, it starts from the doctrine of creation and moves through all our experiences.
I'm not sure if I totally go with that, but in my experience, I've experienced how abusive the church can be. Unfortunately, I have an addiction to church, which makes it a problem. But I had the opportunity to walk away from church, and I came back. But I think, for me, that motivating belief was that it was about Jesus showing us the power of love and acceptance within ourselves.
And I think for me, it's we model ourselves after the life and teaching of Jesus. Jesus was here on earth because God so loved the world without qualification. There was no God loved this group and this group and this group, but God so loved the world. And so being a part of that world, we are loved by God. And then Jesus' greatest commandment being love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And anything that I wouldn't want to happen to myself, I sure wouldn't want to happen to my neighbor, and any rights that I want for myself, I sure can't deny to my neighbor. And I can remember reading something once that said, we only love God as much as we love the person we love the least. And I try to hold on to that in my dealings with anybody, stranger, friend, and foe, is that the love that I show to that individual is indicative of the love that I have for God, and that kind of guides what I do next.
Let's say there's, so I came to faith at we grew up in because I was 20, and there's this passage in Scripture where the disciples, people following Jesus, like crap is going down. I realize there's a video, I won't say another word. Crap is going down, and people are leaving, like left, right, and center, because Jesus is doing like these totally upside down things. He's like, how about we love poor people, whatever. And all these people leave, and he turns to the people who are closest to him, and he says, like, you want to go too? Like, you can leave too. And they say, where else would we go? You have the words of eternal life. And I think what that means in my life is like, you have abundance, that God has the best thing. And so where the church has over a number of years said to the LGBT community, you don't get to have that stuff that he has. And Jesus is like, hell to the no, they do. But on the flip side, wherein the thing that sometimes reactionarily church congregations have done is to say the LGBT community, like, it's this idea of, right, the oppressed become the oppressor. Now it's all about everybody gets in and we're not going to talk to God about any of it. I think that my intention and one that I'm trying to grow to the LGBT community is one that says, like, you belong at the table too. Not you rule the table, and neither do I. The one who has the words of eternal life rules the table. And he says, welcome. So that's why I do this.
Heading back to the back of the room. We have like 3 sets of questions back here, so I'm gonna go with who asked first. Sorry. I love you. Anyway. Hi, Rabbi. Hi. So this is kind of a nuts and bolts question regarding conservative Judaism. Okay. I know that halakha is binding, but I'm sure there are conservative rabbis out there who would prefer not to do same-sex marriages. Are they allowed to say, I would do this, if conservative Judaism says that they should?
So I started off by saying that Jews are very good at arguing with each other. Conservative Jews excel in that position. And when I said in 2006 that we approved some decisions of the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards that said that gays and lesbians can be ordained as rabbis and invested as cantors, and that rabbis and cantors can officiate at same-sex marriages. We also passed rules that said, decisions that said the exact opposite. And both are valid within the understanding of conservative Jewish law, and rabbis can choose which one they're going to follow. And it is, I think, unfortunately the case that many of Canada's conservative rabbis have won, or even authored, the ones that said that gays and lesbians can't be ordained and can't have their marriages solemnized. So, yeah, it's binding and it goes either way, which is complicated and, yeah, unfortunate.
I think I'm okay. So I have a kind of combined comment and question. I know Steph started off the session by sort of talking about this fear that exists among many members of the LGBTQ community around religion. And I think that's been a roadblock to dialogue a lot of times. And a lot of exposure and information around religion, things that we see in the media, things that we hear about, are things that I think really break down or build more barriers around having that dialogue. And it's incredibly refreshing to sit here today and dialogue with a group of very open-minded leaders in religious communities. But I'm wondering how I think we see this in our LGBT communities on campus and everywhere, that there is this resistance to having this dialogue, and I think a lot of times it's two-sided, but many times there are people like you folks who are open to having these discussions. I guess my question comes down to how, as a campus community, can we try to ensure that people are being more open to this dialogue? How do we start to break down those barriers? How do we start to encourage people to be open to different religions, to different sexual orientations, and to have these really important dialogues that can make people more open-minded about this sort of thing? Sorry, loaded question.
Make a 30-hour day. Because it does involve having a real conversation with someone, and that takes time. And it takes commitment, and somehow you have to start getting that to happen.
Well, come see me at the chaplain's office at 256 downstairs here, and we'll set something up. I think more opportunities just like this, I think, is the way that you open up minds and hearts just with this kind of dialogue. So come and see me.
I think, like, decide to be friends with someone who is different than you. So I'm going to sing along with my friend Mark over here is a friend of mine, and we've been friends for years, and there was a time, like 2 weeks ago, we were having a conversation, and I was like, we were talking about, like about sexuality and about that stuff going on and God and whatever, and crap, I wish I could remember exactly what I was talking about, but I can remember having like a fear about a question I was about to ask him, because I'm straight, so I don't know. And I had this question to ask, and I ask it, and he, he's like totally lovely, so he talks to me about it. And I say to him, like, oh, I'm so glad, like we're at a point in our friendship where like you won't run away because I asked this question. You know what I just thought? I thought, I'm going to ask it, and Mark can't run away because we've loved each other for too long for him to run. And he says to me, actually, like, you built trust with me, like, a while ago. You could have asked a while ago. I wasn't going to run a while ago. And I think that's just a need for us as people to be building trusting and loving relationships with people who are different, so we can ask the questions and figure out the stuff and not be afraid that we're going to run away from each other. That was helpful.
If I can follow up on that, about 2.5 years ago, Fiona rang me up. And my first response was, do you know who I am?
It was.
And she said yes, and we had coffee, and I think that's the first time I've sat down in a long time with somebody who identified as evangelical to have a conversation. And it has always been one of the highlights of my ministry here in London. So.
I totally have a follow-up question of my own prior to an audience question. Well, I have a personal follow-up question for Fiona, aka what was the question?
I'll tell you later, I'll remember it.
But I heard a lot of like, oh, if you come to me, I will totally talk to you. So you as the queer individual kind of need to come to me, the religious individual. But at what point do we need to, like, yeah, I'm totally all for that. Like, we all totally came to you and said, hey, do you want to do this? And you're like, yeah, of course, and we came. But how do we start getting more of that middle ground where the religious individuals and folks are like, hey, we want to start dialogue, we're going to approach you guys, or like, and how can that be seen? Like, or can we only ever envision it as the queer individual going to see the religious one?
I asked Ken to send me the promotional materials for this so that I could put it in our synagogue bulletin. Because I don't know who in my congregation is gay or lesbian because I've only been there 3 months. I don't know everybody, and I don't know that about them. And I wanted to put it out there that I'm going to speak here so that they would know that I'm here and available to talk if they want to. And I think that is a first step toward making those connections. It's not enough, but we're getting there.
We also appreciate the free advertising.
It worked too. 4 of my congregants are here.
I think trust in inviting. I think more. I know any number of my colleagues would be happy to be here and to be invited into a context where a true dialogue can really happen. We don't all know how to do that. I mean, I think particularly in mainline churches and stuff, we've been doing stuff in the same way for such a long time. It's hard to know how you step out of it. And this is, I am very grateful for this forum. I mean, this is a wonderful invitation to the wider community to be present. And I would say, don't look at the articles in the newspapers so much, and talk to real people. Because there's so much, as you said, I mean, what is out there in the media is largely the extreme and bizarre in many ways when it comes to religion. And that's not what it's about.
But I think by the same token, we have an obligation as religious leaders to put it out there and let people know who's welcoming and who isn't, and where the safe places are and where they're not, instead of expecting the LGBT community to kind of stumble in the hopes that, I don't think that's fair. I don't think that that's fair to ask our community to risk any more than we've already risked by expressing a desire to connect with the religious community. And so I think it's incumbent upon us as religious leaders to put it out there, make ourselves known in the community, and provide venues for safe, positive discussion.
I come from an Islamic background, but I don't, like, as of recently, I don't really identify as a Muslim because, as I think, as you all know, in the Quran especially, it excludes people, like lesbians, gays, bisexuals, all of those, like, in written text. It's been said and it's been proved, and there are stories about it. But my question is it mentioned in the Torah or the Bible, like the stories, is there a specific verse against homosexuals, and if so, how has that changed in recent times?
The Torah, the Talmud, the Midrash, which are foundational written texts in Judaism, have a lot of homophobic comments in them. And through a lot of work and a lot of soul searching, we've reinterpreted those texts. In some ways it's none of my business, but I can't help but say I don't give up on Islam. Those texts could be reinterpreted too. They could be.
And just a word about the interpretation of any scripture is, I mean, so I come from a Christian tradition, so there's like, depending on who you talk to, like these top 5 like scriptures that you can pull out and be like, being gay is awful, or pull them out and say, see, like Jesus was trans, or David and Jonathan had a homosexual relationship, or whatever. Throughout scripture, the thing I have found is that sometimes it kind of depends on how good of an arguer you are, which side is right. Does that make sense? And we actually need to be people who recognize scripture as something that was written in a context. Do you know what I mean? Like if someone found my diary like 2,000 years from now, they could interpret it in a lot of different ways than it was meant. And that doesn't mean that it's wrong in what it says now, but it does mean that we need to have a lot more grace together as we interpret scripture, and seek the one, depending on the scripture, that we believe inspired it, instead of just our personal bias, depending on either side.
Make sure you're all like done your head nodding. And, like, there's a lot of head nodding, and I'm not quite sure sometimes that goes like, and I'm good, and what was it like, or just not quite sure how it works. So another audience question via text. I'm not always reading my phone, like just so you all know I'm not rude. I'm just checking messages from people out here. So generally the media portrays the church as a negative force with regards to LGBT issues. Do I think the media portrays religion, do you think the way the media portrays religion is somewhat accurate when speaking in broad terms about your particular religion? / comment on the accuracy of media portrayals of your religion. I see some really like intrigued faces up there. As well, please note that people, if you guys have to leave for class, we totally understand. Education rocks. And people aren't just being rude, they have to go to class. Education rocks. Sometimes. What do you think of the media? There, I dumbed it down. Just.
Can I give you a place to start? I think religion portrays religion in the media. One of the things that Karen and I talk about is when we can have the positive voices as loud as the negative voices, we'll have more balance. Look at what's going on in the United States this week. Today's election day, in case you didn't notice. It's like they tried with Bush, they got to hang on now, and they're just pulling out everything. All the money is going into it.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Sorry.
I think religion portrays religion in the media.
Yeah, I think I would say that what I have heard from the panel is hopes for what religion, God, whatever, wants us to go after. But that doesn't actually, I don't think that means that we believe in the church or in the synagogue, but in general, that everyone's super open-minded, and if you read something in the media, you're totally off base. Because my guess would be that as a person who identifies as queer, that it is often that you would experience some form of prejudice within religion. So that is to say, I think the media is at times quite correct.
Jews are good at arguing with each other publicly, and in fact, we have many newspapers in North America dedicated to doing just that. So, yeah, Canadian Jewish News, we can argue about that, the Forward. Yeah, we're really good at that.
I think religion is portrayed. I'm not quite sure how to feel about what you said. I think religion is portrayed in the media by religious politicians, which is not necessarily religious. I think like when Paul started off saying it's about politics, I mean what you see in the media is a political side of a human expression of religion, and we're not all engaged in that kind of religious forum. And the media is just not going to pick up on us standing on the street corner and saying we love everybody. Well, then
$6 billion spent in the U.S. election. How much of that came from religious right? How much of that was block media? No religions to Bishop Catherine down there, but they sure listen to the Mormons.
I don't know what the solution is to it. And the truth is that some of it is reality. I mean, it is reality. This is part of religious expression in North America, particularly that we see. It's one side of it.
I have one question. So I was wondering if you think that the situation for gays and lesbians with the LGBT community would be better if there wasn't religion? Like if we passed, I know it's like a complicated question, but if there was no such thing as a religious, or a church basically, in the past 2,000 years, would it be different? Or it would be different, it would be better?
I think the human race has a pretty poor track record on acceptance of the outsider and the marginalized, period. I'm not sure that it can be traced completely back to religion. I think you'll find it in places without religion.
Yeah, I think religion is just a product of our need for spirituality. And so it's not really about an institution, it's about the people in it, or even outside of it.
The church is full of human beings, fallible human beings, and those are the same ones who are on the outside of the church. And we have a tendency as human beings to shy away from diversity and anything that doesn't seem familiar to us. And so I don't believe you can lay it all at the feet of the church.
Remember that this is a week of Holocaust remembrance, and there was a force and a time in which a lot of the LGBT community were persecuted by a force with no religion.
Hello.
He loves the microphone.
I do, I really do. Yeah, so it strikes me that, I mean, a panel like this and a discussion like this can be very encouraging, particularly for people who are coming maybe expecting to hear a lot more negative viewpoints or things like that. But it also, you know, a number of comments have been made that many of you have pretty painful sounding stories, or parts of them are very painful. You know, the reality is that if we go to churches that have said anyone who comes belongs, then that has been said to the people who would like discriminate against LGBT people as well. And you know, even the great conversations requiring, you know, trust, as I'm the person Fiona was talking about, like, you know, the story behind that is that Fiona and I trust each other and can ask each other hard questions because a lot of crap that was really, really painful has gone down. And so, and in all that, like, we need a way to persevere. So my question for any of you is, what can you tell us about hope?
This is a good choice. I should start calling on you. Frank, what do you have to say about hope?
I don't know. I'm always tempted to kind of throw the question back. I don't know. Certainly in terms of the Catholic Church, I mentioned that the Dignity Group, its purpose is to try to bring about change in structure and teachings. And in those two areas we have completely failed. But you kind of move on and we do different things, and so I think we have succeeded in some other areas. And so I guess there's hope. I mean, yeah, I don't expect the impossible. I mean, there can't be surprises, but I wouldn't bet money on certain things. Some people expect that with the statistic that I gave about the huge discrepancy between what the people believe and do and what the teachings are, how long can that kind of schizophrenic type of organization last? So some people are predicting that there will be some sort of implosion or explosion. I don't know. If there is that hopeful? I don't know.
I think it's good to have lots of different religions and lots of different perspectives. Because if we were all one big church, it would be horrible. But what I hope for is that we'll stop judging each other and we'll start to respect each other.
The hope that I think about is that religion itself is a vehicle, a vessel, a context. The real stuff is about our relationship with the divine, our relationship with God, which in itself is transformative and life-giving. And that's not the property of any religion or any church. It's God's work. And that work is there despite us many times. and I believe very strongly. And for me, it's been that developing my sense of an ongoing relationship which will continue to transform me, transform those around me, that keeps me in, keeps me going.
I guess, unlike Frank, I expect the impossible. If the resurrection means anything, it means expect the impossible. And I know that I can't turn the church around, but I know that I can, in my own venue, provide that safe space and provide that inclusive energy. And maybe somebody's watching, maybe somebody needs that, and that will move from my office out and beyond that to something else, that to create that positive atmosphere, that maybe one thing that I do or one person that I connect with or one service that I offer is going to mean something to somebody, and just provide that something to carry forward for someone else.
We're going to move to our second last question. Wrap it up.
Hi there. So I actually only started going to church services a couple years ago, and I was never raised in a home that had any faith. My parents let me choose what I wanted to do, and when I got to London, I discovered United Church, and I just fell in love. And I actually decided this year that I'm going to seek baptism next month, because it's never something that I was, and it was just always something that I wanted to be. Now that I've fallen in love with my faith and something that's really important to me. But a lot of people have told me recently that because I'm gay, it's not going to mean anything, because the only reason that I will be allowed to do it is because it's to make it accepting to everyone. That's what I've been told, so that even though I'll be baptized, it won't mean anything, because the only reason I'm allowed to do it is because they want it to be accessible to everyone. So what I want to know from you is, do you believe that the sacraments that I would want to take part in will still mean something, even though I'm gay?
Yeah. From my theology of baptism is an outward expression of something that's happened inside of you. So it's a very personal thing. It's like a coming out, really, in a different sort of way.
It's a public affirmation of you already belonging. It's something that's already taken place, just by your very existence that you belong, and it's just a public declaration that yes, indeed, I do belong as part of God's family. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it means something.
Yeah, and gross that people have told you that. Gross. I am sorry.
Okay, so final last question I want each and every one of you to answer. I've been actually trying to figure out how to word it properly for the past hour and 27 minutes according to that video camera. A lot of you, we've talked about it, have struggled with religion a little bit here or there, like religion accepting you. But kind of what is your message to the student who may be sitting out here, standing here, about what should make them keep going? What should make them seek religion of any sort, whether it's your religion or a different religion? What made you keep going? What made you fight and struggle or just persevere? I'm going to start with Fiona this time, just again.
Great. My message is, I don't care how old you are or where you're from, you're not all that you could be yet. And I think that God made you, and I think that He's kick-ass, and I think that He knows you better than you know yourself, and has abundant life for you. I think that you're broken like I'm broken, like the church is broken, and to be able to together recognize that and say, okay, then God, who makes beautiful things out of the dust, would you do something with this pile of crap, is kind of worth it. Yeah.
may deliberately not answer the question directly. But one thought I have is kind of thinking about the Toronto chapter of Dignity. We have a member who's kind of a recent convert to Catholicism and thinks it's wonderful, okay, and I certainly have a number of reservations. Now, he came from Jehovah's Witnesses, and today we don't have certain denominations represented. So certain evangelical groups are not represented on this panel, whether it's Latter Days or others. And I guess I would invite you to maybe extend a special hand of friendship to anyone who you know belongs to a religion that is quite oppressive to LGBT people, and to try to kind of accompany them on their journey. And maybe we find a way to one of the denominations kind of represented in the panel today that are welcoming. But in the meantime, they may have to deal with their own institutions that are anything but welcoming.
I think that everyone has in them spirituality, and your religion is where you can best develop that, and it's part of who you are and needs to be developed. We're not perfect, and for Judaism, become part of the argument for something better.
I would say know that God wants most of all for you to be who you are. And that is the greatest honor that you can give to God and the greatest worship you can do. So be yourself.
I think the message is you are loved, you are accepted just as you are a gift to the world, and you have a gift to give the world. So find the place that you can give.
Faith is a huge source of joy, and we each need joy for our journey.
Well, I'd like to thank all 6 panelists. Counting at first I would say 7 because I can't count. But I'd like to thank you all for making it out today from near like 10-minute walk away to a couple hour commute. So thank you all for coming out, and thank you all for listening and staying and maybe skipping class. I know a couple of you are skipping class now. So yeah, see, Fiona says this is a good choice. I don't know. But thank you all. This was great. Hopefully we'll have another one.